Who showed up? What is currently trending in the marketplace? Where did attendees get the most benefit from? And was it worth it? All right, cool. So thank you. Welcome. So I am Brian Johnson. I'm with Canopy Management, and thanks for joining me today. This is the day right after prospershow 2022 in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the United States that just happened this week. And so I'm going to recap what happened at this show. This is one of the largest Amazon focused shows. It is run by an event coordinator, an event promoter. It's not actually run by Amazonians anymore. However, they do try to pull in. They have a panel that tries to pull in as far as what they think the speakers should be and the content should be, and ultimately what kind of vendors that are come in. And it changed this year, which I thought was pretty interesting. I'm going to go through that. So I said that I'm going to do 22 takeaways from prospershow 2022. Cool for marketing. I'm actually going to give you a lot more than that. So it's going to I'm just going to bullet point this thing out and go through it. So I welcome your questions and your comments. I see that we are still, obviously there's a lot of people still coming in here. However, what we're going to be talking about today from the big 22 or the big takeaways from prospershow 2022 is including things as far as not just these, but who showed up. What is currently trending in the marketplace? Where did attendees get the most benefit from? And was it worth it? Now, it was just nonstop for about 3 or 4 days. And it was a lot of, well, I'll get into it. I'll get into as far as like what was actually there, what you missed out on, and potentially what you could have ignored as well. Just some a little bit of background for those of you who are just joining me for the first time. My name, of course, is Brian Johnson, and I have had the privilege over the last 7 years in the Amazon space. I've been in e-commerce for over 14 years now, but in Amazon for about 7 years. And I've had the privilege of guiding over 20,000 brands sell now over $1 billion. And my agency even manages over $1 billion a year in managed revenue on Amazon. So to say that we've got a lot of experience is probably an understatement, but focusing primarily on native Amazon PPC advertising, demand side or display advertising on and off Amazon, the conversion rate optimization, and of course, differentiating or setting yourself apart from your competitors, which is critical in 2021 and 2022. So as you can see, because I was an early adopter of this space, I had to bring to market a number of things as far as first software, first course, first community, not the first agency. However, we are now on the Forbes 5,000 fastest growing agencies in the e-commerce space. So I'm extremely proud of that and my entire team. We have a global team and we're always looking to hire new talent. And so, yeah, look us up if you want to join our team, our tribe. So as far as attendance at prospershow 2022, here's kind of the makeup that we had here. I threw in a couple of images as far as the floor goes. There were about 150 roughly vendors or booths that were set up. Some were co-sponsored, which was kind of interesting. We're seeing a lot more co-sponsoring or collaboration between different software agency vendors that are coming together this year, which makes a lot of sense because the cost goes up, and frankly, it just makes a lot more sense because they work together well. But I will say is that it was a bit heavy on the vendor side this year. There was probably more attendees as far as the sellers, as far as the brands showing up, but there's some critical differences from previous shows to this shows. And this will tell you as far as how Amazon is evolving as a platform, okay? One of the things that we saw on this, and I'll go through some of what the profile of the vendors that were there, as well as the content that was being spoken about and how that has changed from previous years. Again, telling you where the focus is now and where you should probably pay a bit closer attention to. As far as the vendors go, it was probably heavy on vendors, I would say. It's not one of the biggest shows. There's much bigger shows in the retail market, but from an Amazon focused show, about 150 booths, probably about right for this size of show. I think there was maybe a couple of thousand attendees overall. Probably half of those were vendors. but they spaced it out. We had a bigger exhibit hall space, and it was a little bit more spaced out. So it felt, you can see how wide these hallways are in the exhibit hall. It felt like there was fewer people than last year because the halls were wider, right? And so there was a lot more room for people to mingle around, and it wasn't as dense as it actually probably was. But the other thing that I noticed is, probably because of the content from the 2021 Prosper Show, is we saw a lot more attendees as far as brands and sellers that only bought exhibitor hall passes. So they only wanted to come in. They maybe came in for one day. They would talk to the specific vendors and suppliers that were there in order to get their questions answered. They weren't as much, well, apparently those were not interested in the content at all. They weren't convinced that it was what they needed. And I hate to say it, but I agree with them. There are some very credible speakers, more credible speakers that came up this year. However, I will tell you is that the mix, Prosper Show still has not dialed in as far as their exhibitor attendee content mix yet. And I think they're still learning the Amazon space. And I think they're making choices they're hoping will pull in some of the more enterprise companies. And that is what happened this year. I'll get into that. All right. As for, so then, like I was saying, okay, I think I counted probably 149 vendor booths. There may be 150, 160, something like that, right? So ballpark. Probably the biggest number of vendors that I saw, or exhibits that I saw, had to do with software, whether that was automation or research. You know, certainly there was advertising software, there was keyword research software, there was automation for common tasks that you have, like asking for reviews or appealing for credit back for lost stock, you know, these kinds of things. And so, you know, payment processors, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of software vendors. I would say that it looked probably most heavy on software vendors. Agencies was notably, a lot more agencies have come to the show this year. Again, they're focused in, like Canopy Management. We had our booth, we had a brand new shiny booth, and a lot of those that showed up seemed to have an upgrade to their booths from previous years, and we were no exception on that. We of course, we're not afraid to kind of, like, you know, fly in the face and stand out a little bit. And so we were kind of flinging the nose at the aggregators with our booth design. So our booth actually this year, it was extremely succinct. It was simply like, don't sell your brand, double it and then sell it, which obviously reflects the performance record that Canopy Management has in the advertising and marketing side for vastly growing our client accounts within a year. So I'll get to that at another time here. But there was certainly a lot more advertising agencies available, listing optimization and graphic design agencies, legal, various sides of legal and IP protection, certainly accounting and funding, shipping, logistics, 3PL type of vendors that were there, even more companies that were coming in regarding, as far as virtual assistants, staffing, those kinds of companies were there. So there was a good selection for most brands in order to get some things solved, or to automate, or to outsource some of the things that maybe are a pain point for them. So I would say that the vendor selection was actually spot on for what shoppers need. There was even a vendor there that was specifically, you know, that they were focused only on trying to help Amazon brands get over to Walmart, which they're not alone, but they were very focused on, like, this is the only thing we do. The aggregators was far less than last year. Last year was like half the floor. It felt like it was owned by the aggregators, right? Did any of you go to the last year, to 2021, or even any of the previous Prosper shows? Let me know in the chat there, if you will. And I see that we continue to grow in attendance, so appreciate you on that. Still want to know where everybody's coming in from, and then also whether or not you attended either a past or this last Prosper show. That definitely helps me. But the aggregators were replaced by some of the aggregators that we normally would expect to come in with these big towering 20 by 20 booths. They weren't there at all, which was interesting. And you've probably heard rumor in the marketplace that there's kind of been a shift in what the aggregators are doing. They're kind of pulling back. Yes, to some extent. They've gotten a little bit more they're doing a little more scrutinizing of the brands that they're picking up. But what you're seeing is the merger and acquisition and kind of the capital funding companies that are starting to show up and going direct. They're just bypassing the aggregators and say, I want to look for brands that I can acquire myself. Do they have the Amazon sales channel experience? Probably not, or maybe not. However, they're walking around and they are also making partnerships with a lot of these agencies to say, hey, we've got a gap, let's go ahead and fill it, So they're making an attempt to come in direct, bypassing the aggregators and competing directly with the aggregators, in fact. So we saw a lot more as far as like business brokers. The brokers were kind of interesting because their primary message was, look, when you feel like you're ready to sell your brand, right? Don't just talk to one aggregator. Have us talk to multiple aggregators, get multiple offers from aggregators, from acquisition, from merger and acquisition or M&A houses, so in other words, they want to get you several offers coming in so that you can maximize the multiples and obviously the return and the terms that you get. So that I definitely agree with. That is a kind of a best practice when it comes to exiting a company, is to have multiple offers so that you've got options you can choose, so that you're not feeling trapped into a deal. Now, the aggregators that I talked to, I went around and I talked to all the aggregators, and I specifically was saying, like, look, okay, what are you looking for now versus what have you abandoned? And they're still looking, of course, for the highly rated products, ideally those that have high review counts. They specifically said a kind of common theme here was they're looking for where a brand has a product that has enough reviews that kind of well overshadow the competitors. In other words, they stand out from the competition. They aren't simply just like, oh, they're on page one for every keyword. They are separating themselves. They are moving faster. They are, they've got a lot faster growth acceleration, if you will. They stand out as far as review count. They certainly have a 4.5 star rating on average. So they're kind of looking for those standout products that are already a success. So and they're looking to acquire those. They are definitely, before they were kind of on the fence as far as the type or the niche, but they are definitely, a common theme I saw was they're not looking at supplements except in very rare situations. And I think part of that is they stated because there's a lot of competition in the supplement space, but there's also discussion or talk about as far as some of the liability, what these aggregators have to do in order to acquire. Does anybody here, is anybody on the call here have a supplement brand and they're hoping to exit at some point? I'm curious as far as just, put like a 1 or something like that in the chat. It would be interesting to know. But what they're finding is that they don't trust the quality control. That tells me that if they're having to go in and have each product lab tested, they don't trust the quality, which means they probably have been burned by the quality in previous acquisitions that they have had. They obviously, they don't want the liability. They don't want FDA scrutiny. They want to make sure they're bringing to market something safe, and maybe they're doing some consolidation of different products into a supplement brand, for instance. But they're shying away pretty heavily because that's the first thing they stated is like, yeah, we're not doing supplements. Second thing was interesting. Maybe not that, it was clothing. So clothing, usually the problem with clothing is that there's a whole bunch of SKUs. It's a textile. It can be mass produced, easily produced. There's a lot of selection. The vast number of variations in clothing is something that from a shopper's perspective creates too many choices, too many options to go with. And they will, it slows down the buying process, the decision process. It creates more like kind of like a analysis by paralysis problem, or a paralysis by analysis, excuse me. The conversion rates are oftentimes single digit, well below 10%. 3 to 5% conversion rate in clothing is not uncommon, especially in pretty saturated niches like, baby cloths or, face masks or, these kinds of things, because there's too much selection, too much competition, not enough margins. The conversion rates just aren't there. And so they're like, no, thanks. So, I mean, if you're in that line of business, one of the things that I do see is if you can get into a niche where you've got a product that focuses on a specific niche, right? Specific target audience, that is, and therefore you've got a higher conversion rate. That could be a backpack for a certain type of mountain climbing, audience, for instance, or it could be, something like, wearable art for surfers or something like that. You see what I'm saying? It's not just for everybody. It's for a specific audience. You can still blow up that brand, and they may still actually look at it from an acquisition standpoint, but it's on you now to make sure that you're building out the branding and that social proof beyond Amazon to say, look, we have this big following, we've got fans, we have social media presence. We're not just selling a product head to head on Amazon, and our conversion rates and our ratings and our reviews reflect that. And so they will still consider those niche or those breakout ones, right? Let's see here. So let's see what else here. Oh, the product development, design, prototyping, a lot more kind of like something you would normally see at like manufacturer shows. And that is, 3D modeling, CAD design kind of stuff. Mold design, in other words, manufacturing mold kind of design, as far as being able to help you craft your design, maybe do some 3D printing to model it for you, to prototype it, to come up with some specs and some engineering specs so that you can then give that to a manufacturer rather than having the manufacturer do that for you. And they tend to do a better job of it, and they tend to help you through at a much lower cost than if you had the manufacturer do that as well. Because as some of you know, if you've had your own product created with a manufacturer, let's say in China, and that you had to have a mold created, it could be anywhere from a few $1,000s to tens of thousands of dollars to probably even over $100,000 for something more complex. Training groups was another thing too. You see more of that as far as, hey, you know what, we've got a network, we've got a system, you can, buy into our, monthly, training group. They call it, mastermind, or, but they're just kind of like large training groups that collaborate. Most of the ones that appeared at prospershow 2022 seem like they have a legitimate track record. They weren't some of the sketchy ones you can catch on YouTube sometimes. All right, let's keep moving it forward here. Events and parties were definitely there this year. Of course, it is Las Vegas, and so naturally, a lot of them kind of went big with this. So I will say that, you had like the Helium 10 one, which was kind of like you can call it the flagship party. Zero networking whatsoever there because it was way too loud. It was a concert setting. Everybody had gone to pre-parties or pre-networking events before going to this event, and they had Mark McGrath playing there with just a single drummer. It was a little bit sad, but those of you who grew up around Sugar Ray will recognize Mark McGrath in the songs. And of course, they had him as the guest singer. So it was fun and kind of surreal a little bit. It was a big crowd, but it was extremely loud, and there was absolutely no way you were going to talk to anybody. The same thing happened with the Penthouse events as well. They tend to, even though they had these big penthouses with multiple rooms, everybody seemed to want to consolidate into the main room. And so it would get really loud. You'd have to shout, and it was just difficult to do any kind of real networking. So again, it was partying. The pre-events I think were probably the best opportunities. So the pre-events to either the Penthouse or the concert type of Vegas style parties, the pre-events, Canopy hosted one ourselves that we did at a speakeasy, at like a whiskey bar, like a bourbon speakeasy, which was really cool because it was, of course, smaller audience, but it was everybody, got a chance to actually have multiple conversations. It wasn't like it was quiet, but at the same time, it wasn't so loud that you couldn't easily talk to people and have conversations and network with people and say, oh, you're selling this, cool, awesome, that kind of blends with mine, or just have those kind of conversations. And a lot of people walked out saying, it's like, wow, this was the best time I spent. So I think more of some of these breakout events, sorry, losing my camera here. Some of these breakout events is definitely you need to put on your list for future ones. Now, some of these are invite only. And so sometimes you've got to find out, okay, is this going to be a small event? Is it going to be, what kind of venue is it in? Is it in a penthouse, or is it in something that is not going to be too loud so you can actually have conversations? Because networking is probably one of the biggest benefits of going to any kind of trade show conference like this, right? One of the things that was I thought was pretty interesting, of course, is, as you can see from the photos, no masks. No, like there was maybe out of 2,000 people, I think I maybe saw 6 people wearing masks, just out of curiosity or fear or whatever the case was. And so we saw that quite a bit. The airlines are still requiring masks. I believe for another month, they're still doing it, but it's definitely starting to open up now. Prosper 2022 was an example of where the vendors came in first, owned the space, and the attendees kind of held back saying, okay, I don't have enough stock because my logistics sucks, and they could have solved that problem by talking to some of the vendors at the conference. Maybe they've got some other challenges with their brand. Some simply just didn't show up because either they were trapped by weather events that were going through the country at the time, ice storms, that kind of stuff, or they simply just weren't comfortable yet in traveling. So they didn't make their plans ahead enough because they weren't quite sure, whether or not COVID was going to be an issue. And frankly, it was not. Most of us, just in preparation for some of the parties and everything, went out and of course got COVID tested, right before we flew into Vegas. But we never had to use it. In other words, it was kind of common knowledge. Obviously the ultimate test is, okay, right, what happens to all the attendees, a week after the event? How does everybody feel, right? The same thing we did last year. But last year, I remember, is at the very last day, you could start seeing where people were like going, I don't feel so good. I didn't see any of that. So hopefully that means that we're going to start ramping up more of the conferences and getting more conferences coming in, probably more of the regional conferences, more of the mastermind breakouts that occur. I think we'll start seeing those come back, as well as more international ones. Now, obviously, there is some European strife that's going on. It's still pretty localized, but at the same time, I think we'll start seeing a lot more of the European and international conferences that pop up. I know there's a couple that are coming up here. Mexico, of course, because sourcing in Mexico is a big topic this year as well. All right, so as far as the speakers, Prosper Show 2022 has, I'm kind of curious. Okay, open up your chat. I want your feedback on here. What do you think was the most talked about topic in Prosper Show 2022? I want to see a big number of responses here. We got a lot of people on the call. So, open up that chat screen, pop it in there. Let me know that you're paying attention, and let me know what you think, what you speculate was the biggest topics of the year. I'll go ahead and kind of run through these, and then I'll tell you what they actually were. All right, so we've got international expansion, branding, external traffic, logistics, external traffic, logistics. There's a common theme there. International. The first time to learn about the Prosper Show. Yep, very good, awesome. Software, PPC software, advertising, overall cost increases, Walmart, branding. You're spot on, because that's kind of what they had posted up as far as their agenda on a lot of these. So manufacturers in the Americas. Thank you, Jazz, for bringing that up. Surprisingly, There was nothing on that I saw, that I heard of, as far as sourcing, manufacturing in United States, which I think is a huge mistake. Now, you said Americas, which can include Mexico. We did have certainly discussions regarding Mexico, but here's, I'll tell you as far as like what some of the focus was here. I'll get into this here. I appreciate so many of you jumping in. That has a lot of value to me, that know that you're actually paying attention. You're not multitasking too much. But here's kind of what we were talking about. So the way that the show set it up is they pulled in a number of speakers, some of them new speakers, some of them kind of the old school or OG speakers. They were a lot heavier on, hey, we pulled in this ex-Amazonian. No offense to Amazon and the staff that works at Amazon, but they're kind of out of touch. In other words, they worked for Amazon, but they usually had very narrow field of study. If they're talking about what they focused on for the last 5-10 years, cool. That's awesome information. It is valuable insider information, but the problem that I usually have with the label of Amazon Insider is they really didn't have, they don't have diverse information. They have very localized, very specific information and expertise, but just because they work for Amazon doesn't mean that they are in practice. In other words, they have a different perspective than the entrepreneurs who are actually trying to survive with their brands. So that's my only critique on that. And the show went a little bit heavy. They went a little bit more than 10% of the speakers and panelists were specifically intentionally labeled, ex-Amazon Insider, as in they were trying to attract brands and larger brands, as well as 3P brands that where that would actually have some social proof for them. Now, there were better speakers and better topics than last year. They actually apparently heard the complaints about the content from last year, and they tried to improve it. And they focused, they had a pretty diverse set here, as you were talking about in the chat here. Protecting your business, maximizing impact, a little vague there, but I'll point out more specifically on each one of these where their focus lied. Building out your brand, selling internationally, of course, selling beyond Amazon, optimize your efficiency, and driving traffic. I was shocked, as Jazz, you probably are, and you pointed out well, is how little there was regarding domestic sourcing. Now, we do know, I can talk about this a little bit more later probably, but we do know, of course, is that the cost of logistics. It's not, nobody's going to get shocked as like the cost of sourcing products and shipping and logistics has become a problem. And I don't see where it's going to be resolved this year. It's probably not going to be resolved in the next couple of years because of all the bottlenecks, the shortage of employees that are willing to work, the rising inflation, the restriction on being able to source raw materials. I know now this is not an Amazon thing, but I know, for instance, that Toyota Motors just halted their production line on 2 of their minivans because they can't get a hold of the computer chips. They can't get those fast enough. So they shut down operations for, I think, the next month. That's a lot of cars. That's like 40, 50,000 cars that are not being produced. There's going to be a shortage. If you've driven by any Toyota dealership in your neck of the woods, then you'll probably see that they're mostly empty lots. They almost look like they closed down or they're getting ready to move. No, they just can't get inventory. But the other topics that we're driven into, or that they were diving into, driving traffic certainly was one of the more common topics that I think probably a lot of the brands wanted to hear, and they answered that by saying, okay, we're going to have speakers and panels and workshops that talk about some of the driving the traffic. Now, I will say is that one of the other things that wasn't really a specific topic that should have been, and that is 2 things: standing out and minding the gap. Now, if you are over in the UK, you understand what that means, but for everybody else, is minding the gap is in London. It's if you jump onto, like, say a train or a tramway or something like that, anything that has any kind of a gap between the the platform and the train is they're always warning. It's like, look, don't fall in between the train and the platform. But minding the gap is from an Amazon and e-commerce standpoint is more about identifying the strengths or weaknesses of your product versus competitor products and exploiting those weaknesses. It's not simply, like it was a few years ago where you could just throw up a listing and just start selling. You really have to identify, okay, where are the gaps in the marketplace, the keywords that aren't ranking? Is your main image standing out from the competition? A lot of you have heard me talk a lot about that in the last year as far as how to stand out. I've got all those videos on YouTube about it, right? Let me jump into a little bit more specific as far as these content pieces. Okay. Branding, and Denny, yes, as far as like driving traffic and brand pages, yeah, it was kind of intermingled here, but let me kind of go through this from a traffic standpoint, as far as increasing sessions, increasing visits, external traffic, when it came to things as far as like Google ads, YouTube ads, video, became a much bigger topic. TikTok was thrown around quite a bit, but I think there's a lot of people who aren't articulating how to use TikTok properly yet. And I know there's certainly a lot of resistance from anybody who's over, 25 years old, as far as like, do I even belong on TikTok? And I can assure you there's a lot of traffic there, so you need to revisit it. But certainly looking at things as far as like Google ads and some of the automation that might be available, some of the AI solutions for Google ads, any of these things, Google ads, YouTube ads, any kind of external PPC platform or ad platform, the main challenge that they're going to have is, does your product, is it already optimized, right? Did Canopy optimize your listing optimization for a 38% growth in conversion rate, right? I know that was a plug. But as Hamza explained, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. Is Pinterest, of course, any of the social media channels. There's a pullback from Facebook ads and Instagram, mostly because of the footprint that Amazon is kind of being a little more suspicious about. Is, okay, is this being manipulated for search rank or for giveaways, for rebate type of services and systems? And so you're hearing, not on stage, but you're definitely hearing in the private conversations more about pulling away from Instagram and Facebook, which leaves some of the other bigger ones. Pinterest, I completely agree. Pinterest is an underutilized platform. A common mistake that brands make is saying it's like, oh, well, Pinterest is for women. It's like, no, it's majority women, but it's not 80% like it used to be assumed. It's more like 60% to 40%, female versus male. So there might be a propensity toward Pinterest, but it still is a very strong and underutilized platform, potentially gives you an advantage if you were to address some of, if you have a product that can address some of the needs out there in the marketplace for that audience. Certainly, you got the video as far as the YouTube and the TikTok and even like say Instagram Reel. But again, the signals of Facebook and Instagram over to Amazon, while I'm not suggesting that it's like, oh, that's taboo now. I'm just saying like Amazon is paying closer attention. So if you do have systems in place that are manipulating sales and doing rebates, you probably want to mask that a little bit better as far as trying to generate sales and generate traffic. Diversify across different social media platforms is what I am suggesting to you. As far as impact goes, improving listings, maximizing your impact, improving your listings. Obviously, I've been beating that one to death, right? Increasing sessions through better indexing of content. If you're not using, things like A+ content and all the content fields that are on your product detail page, you're not keyword stuffing. You are talking to the consumer. Your message is tight to what the consumer actually needs, what the benefit of your product is. But at the same time, you're also mixing in a wide variety of keywords that you can use. And there's a lot more discussion about really identifying, picking and choosing, being more selective about the keyword opportunities that you have. using detailed keyword research. The tools have gotten a lot better. You're starting to see tools that are blending multiple platforms. It's not like, oh, what's the one software you use? And people go, oh, Helium 10 or Seller Tools or whatever the case is. And you're seeing more solutions that are coming out saying like, yeah, we pull data from brand analytics and Helium 10 and Seller Tools and this app and this other app and keyword research, keywordtools.io and all these other platforms, and they're pulling it together to try to get some common consensus as far as the volume of traffic, the likelihood that that keyword is going to convert, where you and your competitors are ranking for those keywords, and where the gaps are, where the strengths and where the gaps are for you to ultimately test advertising, test content indexing for some of these additional keywords so that you can exploit small opportunities that have been left wide open for you that you can step into. So if you are struggling with that, you definitely need to be looking at what are the keywords and the search terms that you're not going head to head with the 800-pound gorillas. You're exploiting where the gaps where they simply are not ranking well. Okay. And use the keyword research tools to kind of help you judge as far as like, okay, is there a little bit of traffic? Is there a lot of traffic? Chances are they're going to be ranking on a lot of traffic, and they're going to be they're paying less attention to more the long tail multi-keyword search terms, as well as the lower traffic ones. So you can accumulate, if you can get 100 different search terms that all have 100 searches per month, that's probably more than what you're doing right now if your product is kind of stunted. If it didn't launch well, or you're not getting the traffic that you think you need, maybe you've got a really high conversion rate, but your sessions are less than 1,000 per month. Probably a good sign you need to get more traffic, either external or get indexed for a lot more keywords on Amazon. One of my favorite ones, of course, is using something like the Seller Tools Chrome extensions. That actually is some fantastic information that I use there. Customer focus, of course, again, kind of what I was saying, is like your messaging in your listing. You're not talking to the search engine. You're not stuffing keywords. You're not saying this product's for men, women, children, babies, boys, girls, whatever. You're not stuffing. You are talking to the benefit, the hook, trying to get their attention, trying to stand out. This is still working for me very well. Every single day I go in and I look at a niche, and I advise a client as far as like, hey, here's how you exploit it, because here's all the weakness of your product niche. It's still very easy, still pretty blue ocean for me to take over an individual product niche simply by identifying what the common pattern is and where competitors are failing in order to stand out and really hook that target audience. All right, so beyond Amazon, yeah, a little bit more push for Walmart. It was more of a case of, it's kind of like going international, where they're saying like, okay, if you're going to expand international, you might as well expand over to Walmart. Walmart, it continues to invest a lot more money into making sure that they have an easier system to use. And so it is getting progressively better as far as being able to sell on Amazon. Keep in mind is that Amazon is generally a lower price point audience, but not exclusively a low price point audience. In other words, it's worth testing some of your better products. We did notice, however, is whether you're selling on Amazon, Walmart, your own D2C or direct consumer website, like a lot of larger manufacturers are, any other niche marketplaces, your Etsy or eBay or some of these others, is they're all paying close attention to each other. If they identify that you're selling a product on some other platform, they're going to probably enforce price parity, which basically means not parity from a comedic standpoint, but parity, which is saying like your price needs to be the same or better on Amazon than other channels. Otherwise, we're going to suspend your listing or suppress it in some way. And so they've gotten really good as checking, okay, this image matches an image that is being sold on your own site or on Etsy, and you're pricing it lower on your own site. That's a no-no now, right? So they're going to probably catch that at some point if you're not trying to make sure that your prices are lined up across the different platforms. Let's see here. As far as the D2C, direct to consumer websites, right? Whether that could be a Shopify site, it could be Shopify, kind of an example of all the pool of your own shopping cart sites. You see a lot more of that with some of the national and international big brands that sell brick and mortar, sell on the retail store shelves. They are being forced. You saw probably this week a report saying that overall retail sales is down. That's going to put pressure on them to look at e-commerce. In other words, we saw more of a presence of the enterprise level product brands. Those national brick and mortar brands were present at Prosper. And they were paying attention to what is it that we need to do in order to build out not only their direct consumer website, but also obviously the Amazon sales channel, because they understand that, you know, they need to and they don't have control of it. So do expect that this year you're going to start seeing an increased number of brick and mortar, kind of more of the established, you know, consumer product group or direct to consumer brands that are starting to sell more on Amazon and actually own their listings, as opposed to simply just have arbitrage resellers. That's a problem for arbitrage, but you'll find solutions. Yeah, Hamza, as far as like building out your own website, yeah, I definitely recommend that. I definitely, you know, it's the whole, you know, Elon Musk, don't rely on Earth for the, you know, survival of the human civilization. Let's go ahead and colonize Mars. It's the same kind of thing in e-commerce. Don't rely on one sales channel, because ultimately you are putting your business and your family at risk, of course, by not diversifying to a certain extent. Most of the revenue, the conversion rates, the traffic still absolutely is on Amazon, right? But I would definitely say that in 2023, you probably want to look at some kind of diversification to at least start testing that. So yeah. As far as the brand goes, brand loyalty is becoming more and more of a thing. Now, this is kind of where in the past, in the e-commerce space, as a startup entrepreneur, I always looked at it from a standpoint, okay, you've got the entrepreneurs who are down in the weeds, and we are, you know, we're fighting the good fight, and we're just doing what we need to do, and we're shoestringing, all that kind of stuff. We don't have a big staff that came from being, you know, funded, you know, by investors, and we don't have a big brand, a team, you know, marketing team that was educated at Harvard or something, right? And so there was, I used to say that there was, I wasn't as much of a fan as far as the academic side of things. I'm a data geek. I love to research. I love to innovate. I do this all the time with Canopy, and that's one of the reasons why that contributes to what our entire team does in order to have the track record that we have, right? But the academics come in and say, oh, you need to have this whole business plan. You need to come up with a persona of who your target audience is. And as entrepreneurs, we're like, oh, that looks like a lot of work. I don't want to do that. And I'm not really sure the value of it. As we start getting more of the enterprise brands coming into our space, because we want to own it, right? As they start coming into our space, and they have a much better understanding of who their target audience is, what their messaging is. Now, will they dial in the messaging in the main image, the title, the bullet points, the A+ content, as well as we would, because we understand the Amazon sales channel? Or because they understand their persona and their target audience and their needs better, will they be able to modify their Amazon channel content in order to fit that? Or are they simply just going to use the default templates? I think this year they're going to use the default templates. That's an opportunity for you to make sure that you're actually reaching out to whoever your target audience is on social media. Get involved in the conversations. You're not out there posting links saying like, hey, buy my stuff. You're listening to the conversation. You're hearing what they're saying, what they like, what they don't like. You're asking questions so that you understand, how do I solve their problem? Point out and solve their problem with my product. How do I bring a better product to market? How do I take my product, highlight the actual true benefits, and point that out to the shoppers who are on Amazon? That is your superpower right now, is you already understand the Amazon sales channel. If you've been listening to me for the past year, you know you need to be making your listings stand out from the competition, hooking that shopper to pull them into your listing, and then convincing them that all the benefits that your product offers is a better option than what your competitors are doing. That's an easy, low-hanging fruit that if you haven't done it, please fix your listings. we recently, Canopy actually recently put out a book called the 44 Tactics of Product Listing Optimization. I'm kind of paraphrasing the title on that, but the feedback that I got at prospershow was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And so I do want you to be aware of it. Certainly reach out to me. I can get that to you. We're not charging for it right now. So, but yeah, definitely reach out to me and I can get that to you. Canopy Management, as you know, has a phenomenal track record as far as growing brands on Amazon. It's not uncommon for us to have over 100% growth in sales, over 80% growth in profitability, over a 35% growth in conversion rate. Those are our superpowers, and we do it really well, and we do it consistently for the partners that we choose to work with. We do actually offer a free growth audit for your brand. So if you haven't ever seen that, you haven't taken advantage of that yet, I put the link into the chat. There's no catch to this. It's simply just a case of, look, do you want some expert level feedback on your brand from an agency with the reputation that Canopy has to look at your brand and say, like, here's what you're doing right, here's where you're doing wrong, here's where you're at risk against your current competitive set, so you know what to fix. Now, that doesn't mean you have to partner with Canopy moving forward. I highly recommend it if you qualify, but at least you've got some information you didn't have before as far as how you're positioned in the marketplace and where you're screwing it up or where you're getting it right so that you can make some adjustments this year. Okay. All right. I'll come back to that later on. Let me kind of get back to here as far as the brand loyalty piece of it is more social media, which is kind of pains me because I don't want to be out there living on social media. I want to try to get away from social media, but unfortunately that's where our target audience is. That's where it is for my products. That is where it is for our agency clients. It's you can't really avoid it. You just need to find out where your target audience lives. And you need to get involved in the conversation enough in order to listen to them, to hear where their pain points are, like I've been beating to death here. And that is, how do you improve your product listing in order to talk to your target audience and really stand out from the competition so that you're the obvious choice to get more traffic, to get a higher conversion rate, to get higher satisfaction, higher ratings from your shoppers, from your target audience, okay, from your buyers, right? And then you roll in some additional things as far as like advertising and repeat advertising if you've got a consumable product, and you can vastly grow how your presence on the Amazon sales channel. I already mentioned as far as like just social media and TikTok, again, get engaged with your target audience, figure out who they are. It's not, I would say most products, you're not like, oh, what's their demographic? Oh, they live in this city and they're the age between 40 and 45 and they're female and, you know, whatever. It's usually not that specific. It's more about what are they interested in, what activities are they interested in which they would use your kind of product? And therefore, what are some of the common pain points that they talk about? It may not be about your product. That's okay. But at least you understand where the head is and the heart is about your target audience so that you can use language that appeals to them when you say, I do have a product that solves a couple of your pain points. Protection was the next one on the list as far as the content that was going out here. We're seeing more and more where hacking into social media accounts, trademark infringement, IP, copying of sites, copying of products, Black Hat, of course. You probably saw my Black Hat webinar that I did earlier this year. If not, you can just jump onto my YouTube channel and check that out. But those were common things where the attorneys that are available and the services that are available in order to help you recover accounts. I recovered one of my own accounts that was suspended earlier this year, well, actually late in 2021. No fault of my own. It was because Amazon made a mistake. It was guilt by association to some other very loose thing. It wasn't because of anything that I was doing. It was simply because Amazon just didn't have enough information. They made an assumption. They said, well, I'm going to shoot first and I'm not even going to ask questions. I got that resolved, but it took me 65 days in order to solve that. And they burned half of my stock in the process. So that was kind of the finishing award of, oops, our bad, and sorry you lost half your stock. Yeah, that's my own frustration on that one here. But my point on this is I've heard it happen to a lot of brands, and so you at least want to know who you can speak to in order to help you with some of these things. Canopy management, we've got our own counsel that we work with, Evan Sauer, and he's awesome. He's one of those kind of attorneys that is very aggressive. I'm just kind of throwing that out there. If somebody's actually looking for somebody, then, reach out to me and I'll go ahead and I'll put you in touch with them. But yeah, he does a phenomenal job for us. So helping us and our partners from a protection, from an international standpoint. Expanding into other marketplace, you do have to pay attention as far as like what some of the risks are of going into a different culture, maybe what some of the compliance issues are, what your profitability might be of moving, shipping to different countries or sourcing from different countries. And so it is, that was talked more. It's a dry topic. I fully admit. Compliance and risk assessment and that kind of stuff, international laws and culture differences, it can be a dry topic, but it is something that if you are considering, you need to get educated on, and there's quite a bit of information that's available on that. I can certainly put you in touch with people who teach on that or can advise on that as well. Efficiency. Now, I was thinking, when they said, oh, we're going to talk about maximizing efficiency, I was thinking it's like, okay, automation, and when it comes to advertising, and when it comes to customer service and review automation, all this kind of stuff. Nope. Nope. They were talking about making supply chain more efficient, right? So logistics, right? Increasing restock limits, not getting affected as much on that, how to kind of make sure that stays high, and quality control. Quality control, I thought, was an interesting one because it was talked more about how companies are the companies that you may have competitors that have disappeared on you, and a lot of times it's because they're getting too many returns. They're not getting the review rating because they did not take the time in order to really enforce quality control and quality checks in the manufacturing process. In other words, they shortcutted it and they got burned. And usually it wasn't, they did it the first time and said, okay, this worked out great. I don't need to do it again. Wrong. That was a mistake, because ultimately what we do see is kind of a decline in quality and service with the manufacturers and the suppliers over time. And so you do have to you have to keep tabs. You got to keep them accountable. And that's kind of where they were going with that. So those were the big topics that were covered on this. Traffic, the impact, going beyond Amazon, diversifying a bit, focusing more on brand loyalty. And then, of course, protecting your brand, maybe expansion internationally, reducing risk, and, of course, sufficiency, primarily focused in on your supply chain and sourcing. Now, I will throw up this next. I will throw up. That sounds awesome. Was prospershow worth it? Yeah. Yes, it was. But I think it's still a little bit premature, but it definitely was a signal that the fact that so many people were comfortable being in crowds, and they were comfortable from a COVID standpoint, that the conferences and the trade shows and the regional conferences and maybe some of the breakout mastermind trips, that kind of stuff, sourcing trips, these are things that are going to start popping back up again And international travel across the borders is getting easier. Compliance is certainly easier. I highly recommend, if you start going on the circuit, to get the clear, if you're in the United States, get clear certified with TSA, with the Travel Safety Authority. Because that makes it easier to skip lines. But we also saw where air travel is increasing. We see where I certainly observed where TSA was training a lot more staff because of this increase in travelers. And so things are starting to come back. I'm not going to claim normal. I'm just going to say things are returning to more of an area of activity and in-person events. And by far, aside from going in as a brand, because I was, for my own brands, I was also talking to vendors and saying, hey, what can you do for me? Which is a valid question to ask. I was solving for certain things for myself, as well as a lot of brands were there just to talk to vendors and exhibitors to say, hey, what can you do for me? I'm looking to solve this. To outsource and to diversify. Obviously, that's the game that we're into with Canopy Management. Is we are in brand management. We handle marketing and advertising, driving more traffic to listings, increasing the conversion rate, the engagement of shoppers, and the conversion rate of products. Those are our superpowers in the Amazon space. So if you need help with that kind of growth, definitely have a conversation with us. And in fact, I will put up this slide here. Is what I mentioned before, is we have a track record where our average growth in sales is over 100%. Our average, in other words, across all of our clients, our average growth in sales is over 100%. Our average increase in conversion rate is over 35%. Our average increase in profitability is over 80%. We have built a phenomenal set of teams in the Canopy tribe, and it is a great company to work with. I certainly enjoy being here. But what I was recommending to you before is go ahead and use the bit.ly/grow after prosper to simply just get that free evaluation, free audit and growth plan of your brand. Even if you're a startup, even if you say it's like, well, I can't afford you, or I can't afford to outsource anything, or I'm a one man, I'm a startup, or whatever the case, or I'm already working with somebody, get a second opinion on whatever it is that you're doing, regardless of your size. Get a second opinion about what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, so that you can fix it. Okay. More information as a brand owner is better than just being oblivious and pretending like it doesn't exist, because I can guarantee you're missing some things. It's normal. We see it every day. So just to understand that that's normal and then move on. So, all right. Cool. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. My name is Brian Johnson with Canopy Management. Thank you for being here, and I will talk to you soon.